Hey, Hillary,
Yeah,
host of Previously on X-Men. Hillary, is that you?
that's me.
I have a favor to ask of you.
Okay.
Okay. Do you remember the last time when Sarah Jacoby Murphy and I did a whole Dune episode, but we never really told people what Dune was about? In our exuberance, we just dove right in and started talking about the nitty-gritty details. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
We did it again.
But you should have learned from your mistake the first time.
I know, but we didn't. And I know, as I recall, you know nothing about Dune, and I wondered if you would maybe tell us a little bit about Children of Dune.
But I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know anything.
Just flip that book over and just read me that synopsis. Tell me a little bit what Children of Dune is about.
You know what? Sure.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. All right. The Children of Dune are twin siblings, Leto and Ganima Atreides, I know that one,
Okay.
whose father, the Emperor Paul Muad'Dib,
Okay.
disappeared in the desert wastelands of Arrakis 9 years ago.
That's Dune Messiah.
That's okay. Cool.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Which is after this?
No, Dune Messiah. So it's Dune, and then Dune Messiah really plays kind of like the end of the first book, and that's where Paul disappears into the wastelands, and then we're into Children of Dune.
And why does it? Okay, that's fine.
I don't know.
Like their father, the twins possess supernormal abilities. Their father possesses supernormal abilities?
Yeah, it happens.
Okay. Making them valuable to their manipulative aunt, Aaliyah, who rules the Empire in the name of House Atreides.
Okay.
There's more. Facing treason and rebellion on two fronts, Aaliyah's rule is not absolute.
No, it's not.
Okay. The displaced House Corino is plotting to regain the throne. Well, this is just a lot. There's a lot happening.
I know.
Okay, so displaced. The House Corino, previously displaced, now plotting to regain the throne while the fanatical Fremen are being provoked into open revolt by an enigmatic figure known only as the Preacher. Mm-hmm. Do you know who the Preacher is?
Well, I've read all these books, so yeah, I know.
Okay. Is it cool? Is it a good reveal?
Yeah, it is.
Excellent. Aaliyah believes that by obtaining the secrets of the twins' prophetic visions, she can maintain control over her dynasty, and she's their aunt.
She is. Yeah, she's Paul's little sister.
She's Paul's little sister.
Yes.
Paul from the first book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Paul. Of Dune. Yeah.
But Leto and Ganima, who are the twins, have their own plans for their visions and their destinies.
Dun, dun, dun. Wow. Okay.
How was that? That helped?
I mean, your pronunciation aside, the facts I think were really good. You laid out what's going to happen.
I thought it was pretty good.
Do you feel like now you have an understanding of what Children of Dune is about?
Fully, yes, a full and complete understanding. Of just the whole world. I think.
I'm so glad that you do. Fair warning to listeners: we do get into some spoiler territory in this segment a little later on, but I'll tip in a little bit of a spoiler alert so you'll know. But if you haven't read Children of Dune, you might want to tap out once we really start getting into it. Okay, Hillary, you can go back to whatever you were doing before I interrupted your life.
Boiling water.
Okay. All right. Yep. Get to it.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for tuning into Howe's Things, a podcast and radio show from the David A. Howe Public Library, recorded right here in Wellsville, New York. Today, it's finally happened after multiple years and a year of build-up. We're doing Duney, Twoney, Dune. It's me and my friend Sarah Jacoby Murphy. Sarah, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Always happy to talk about Dune with you.
Are you? That's good to hear.
I am, yeah. I it's been a long road, but I'm glad we're here.
Yeah, I am too. You know, I listened to our last Dune episode because I have very foggy memories of it because, as you recall, I was deeply affected with COVID.
I was actually worried about tonight. I wasn't sure if I don't know. If you start getting weird, I'll
if I seem feverish or if I'm lilting one way or the other, you know what's happening. Amazing thing though, because the last time we recorded this, all of us were vaccinated. I was the only one who had COVID, but we were all in a confined space together for hours watching Dune, and nobody else got sick. It was just me.
Yeah, which makes you wonder, like, did watching Dune prevent us from getting sick?
I think it played a
Or
part. Yeah. I
yeah,
think
so
it played a
maybe, like,
part.
spice exposure somehow
Yeah,
to the screen
I think you're
caused
right. I
yeah,
think you're right. The
spice is
last
always
time we talked, we had both read Dune. Now we've gone the distance on the original trilogy, and I did a little extra credit.
Mhm.
So we will get to that in a minute. But I feel like I have to be upfront about something with you, Sarah, and that is I'm so hungry. It's been one of those days where I keep pushing lunch back later and later, and then I'm like, well, I can't have lunch at 4:00. That's crazy, But now basically what's happened is I've eaten a croissant with jam, and that's pretty much the extent of my food journey today. So I hope I don't get hangry.
If it's not COVID, it's something else.
I know.
Who knows?
I know. I know. What about you? Have you had a lovely
I'm
lunch
well
or
fed.
breakfast? You're good?
Yeah, Sally and I actually just got back from eating dinner out because we went to get a Christmas tree, and the Christmas tree place was closed.
Oh no.
Extremely disappointing, but we ended up finding a nice little restaurant that was playing lots of good Christmas
Okay.
music.
Yeah.
So it was a sorry replacement, but it means I'm very full.
Yeah. I get that. I get that. Now you've name dropped your wife, Sally Jacoby Murphy, who listeners know as the Queen of Halloween. When last you were here, you had never listened to an episode of this podcast that Sally and I did together. And I'm wondering if the same is true this year.
Still true.
The
Still
streak
true. I hate
continues.
to disappoint Nick. I really wouldn't
No, it's
want
fine.
anyone,
No, no.
This is what people expect of me now.
That's yeah. You got to write it out. You know what I'm just realizing, Sarah? You and I both lived in different places the last time we recorded a Dune episode together. And we have both moved to new houses since then.
That is true, yeah.
Yeah,
Old houses too.
that's true. That is true. Did reading Dune together precipitate this change in our life? I don't know.
Probably.
I think yeah. I
Yeah.
don't think we can rule it out. That's for sure. All right, so that's what we've been reading over the last couple of years. I want to know in the immediate past what you've been reading. So let's open up our books and see where our bookmarks are at. Sarah, last time we talked, and it's been a year plus, you were reading a Marcel Proust book, and I wonder if you did it. Did you finish it?
So I made it through. Are you trying to shame me right now?
No, I'm genuinely curious if it
all your
happened.
listeners. No, so I made it through like the first, I guess it'd be the first volume of the
Okay.
first book. So it sort of like was its own beginning section. And then I stopped and I haven't been tempted to pick it up again.
Never looked back.
Yeah, never looked back.
Never looked back. Yeah, that's okay.
I like to think I will come back to it someday, though.
I like to think you will too. I like to think you will too. Do you have more bookshelves at your new house? Do you have more capacity to have books on your shelves that you will someday read?
I do, actually. I have an entire poetry shelf now. I have a shelf
Wow.
entirely dedicated to religion and religious
that's the dream.
studies.
Okay.
And then 2 big ones of miscellaneous. Well, one is all nonfiction, and the other is sort of the hodgepodge of extra books. So
I love me some built-in bookshelves.
it's still not enough. Well, ours aren't actually built in. So someday, that's like a someday
Forget
goal.
about it. Jeez.
I know. But somehow, yeah, I got 2 different new bookshelves since moving here, and it's still not enough for my books. I don't
Okay.
know.
I
I don't
can
know
relate.
how. I don't know.
I can relate. I've got boxes of books all over my house, my garage, my basement. So I understand. I understand. And we even did a purge when we moved. I got rid of a bunch, and then we did like Wellsville had a big community yard sale, and we did a yard sale, and I moved a lot of books. Still have a ton. And I run a big library, Sarah. So you'd think I'd have my fill.
You don't have any excuse for owning books, Nick.
I know. You're right. You're right. One last bit of housekeeping before we move on from last year. You said you'd never read a comic book and you were maybe going to try Wonder Woman Earth 1. Did that happen?
That did happen. So
well,
so I think you would actually be proud that that is the only book, quote unquote, that I have read this entire fall.
Wow. Okay. All right. And what did you think?
So for people without context, we bought a fixer-upper, so I've been extremely busy doing the fix-upping part. So I haven't really read anything, but I did just read the Wonder Woman Earth 1 Volume 1. And it was good. Yeah, it was interesting. I don't know what I expected, but I didn't really understand Wonder Woman's backstory. Although I did watch the movie. So did the movie not get in? Like this just this is totally different than the movie, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. So Earth One, if you're not familiar with the line, it's a series of graphic novels that DC Comics does that are sort of their own thing. So they're not connected to the other graphic novels or comics history. They're kind of like a remix of some classic characters telling origin stories and things like that. And the Wonder Woman origin in that is quite different. But I liked it. I think it kind of honored the spirit of the comics. Wonder Woman, truthfully, if you ever look into it, there's a whole movie just about this, has kind of a kinky origin. Like the creator of Wonder Woman had a whole weird thing going on, and some of those things kind of make their way into various iterations of Wonder Woman, and definitely some of that was represented here in Grant Morrison's take on the origin.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I'm happy to get volume 2 and beyond, so I'll have to check in with my local library and see about.
That's right. That's right. Well, I know at the David A. Howe Public Library we have all 3 volumes of Wonder Woman Earth One. I don't think either of the next 2 are nearly as good as the first one. So, with a grain of salt, take that. Maybe that's true of the Dune trilogy that we'll get to in a minute.
Maybe.
I also read a graphic novel. I read Supergirl by Peter David, and it's a weird, trippy '90s comic. There's a whole thing with like demons and stuff. Not what I was expecting from a Supergirl comic. I don't know that I'll read volume 2, but
does that happen a lot, to have sort of like spiritual villains mixed with superhero world?
I mean, occasionally, but this one was really out of left field. It was a bizarre version of Supergirl, so I don't know. I'd never read it because of that, because I was always like, that seems weird. And then I read it and was like, yeah, it was. It really was. So, I'm currently reading Come Together by John Weiner. This is it's a book about John Lennon, but it's not really like a biography. It's more about post-Beatle years and John's political activism and stuff. So it's been interesting so far because I've read a bunch of Beatles stuff. And so like, there's not a whole lot of new information. But I think kind of the laser focus of this is, I'm actually like reading things that I hadn't read before. So that's fun. I like that.
Are you a biography person?
I am. I go through spurts, where I'll like, that's all I want to read for a while, and then I'll get away from it. This one, my wife and I just had our 16th anniversary, and we were in Ithaca, and there's a cool bookstore there. Yeah. And there was a bunch of John Lennon stuff. And this one just kind of stood out to me. So I grabbed it and have been reading it. But
Nice.
It's pretty good. And then I'm reading The Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. Have you read Salman Rushdie at all?
I haven't, and I should, especially given the events of the past year.
Right. Yeah.
But because when was the Satanic Verses written? Was that 70s?
Yeah, I want to say 70s, early 80s, something like that.
Yeah, and no, you should let me know how that is, because I think I'd be interested to read it, and certainly the cultural impact of that book is pretty great.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting so far. I'm not deep enough into it to really like give you, I'm probably 100 or so pages into like a 700-page book. So, but I am liking it. All the reviews and stuff that I'd read about it was like, it's tricky to follow. And that's true. There's some truth to that. I've a couple of times kind of gone and looked up like, okay, what is the plot? Okay, I'm with you. And once you kind of get it straight in your head, it's easier to go through. But I've always wanted to read Salman Rushdie. My wife read, what's it called? Midnight's Children, I think it is. And she actually met Salman Rushdie at an event years back now, and had some book signs and stuff for him and everything. So I'd always wanted to. And so now the time has come. So I'll keep you posted on how it goes.
Please do.
Are you watching anything good? It's the holidays. Have you started Christmas movies?
We, it's funny because I feel like the last time we did a podcast, I had a lot of highbrow content to share. We've been watching Hallmark movies and Seinfeld.
Okay. All right. Seinfeld is just one of those shows where like, if there's like a clip that starts playing on social media or YouTube or something, or like I happen to be somewhere where we're flipping through channels and it comes on, I can't help but watch the whole thing. I love it.
Well, and I've never watched it the whole way through, so Sally has watched it through many times, and I've certainly seen like a lot of the episodes, but we started at the beginning, probably in May, and we've just been like working through them sort of in waves. Like there's some nights where, or, some weeks where we watch it every day, and then others where we don't watch it for a while. But I mean, it is also funny because I had a friend growing up who really loved Seinfeld, and as I watch through it, they'll say things sometimes, and I realize that these lines that I thought were my friend's lines are actually just from Seinfeld.
Yeah.
It was like when I read Harry Potter like 2 years ago, and it was like this cultural awakening inside my brain.
You finally understand things.
Yeah.
I skipped my, I don't remember what year it was. I think Seinfeld went off in like 98 or something like that. So I was probably a junior or senior in high school, and I skipped our final choir concert to watch it. Like I did my part, and then there was like other classes were going, and they were like, "You're not allowed to leave." And I was like, "Okay." Head off and watch the finale of Seinfeld.
Do you regret it?
No, I
and
don't.
Don't give me any spoilers about the finale.
I would do it again, all over again. I love that story your wife has about meeting the guy who did the music for Seinfeld. Do you know that?
I don't think I do know it.
Oh, she met the guy who did the music for Seinfeld, and he wanted like a quote for Seinfeld, and she did the one with Elaine and the Christmas card. You know, here's your Christmas card. You want a Christmas card? And he was like, "You understand the humor of Seinfeld," and that always cracked me up. But
no, she did tell me that. I just forgot about it.
You got it. Yeah. You're back. You're back into it. Okay, so you're watching Seinfeld. You're watching Hallmark Christmas movies. Which one of those has risen to the top? Like, has there been a particularly good, and I mean good in the Hallmark standard of good, Christmas movie that you've watched?
They all blend together. I mean, they're kind of like one big glob of Hallmark movie. And I say Hallmark movie lightly. I'm talking about the Netflix movies that they release.
I see.
The cheesy whatever, Hallmark Little Age.
Yeah.
I think. Well, there's have you watched them at all?
No, I watched The Happiest Season, but that's a Hulu thing with Kristen Stewart.
Yeah, we watched that last year, actually.
I thought it was pretty good. Did you like it?
Yeah, we liked it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always like Kristen Stewart, and what is his name? Dan Levy from Schitt's Creek. Always, I mean, I'd watch him do anything.
Yeah,
Spirited over on Apple was pretty good. It's a musical take on A Christmas Carol with Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds, and it was surprisingly good, interesting. I felt like it was kind of a new take.
Yeah, we should watch it.
I also liked Black Adam. I know you're not a comic book movie lady, but Black Adam was one of those movies that I just didn't have any interest in watching, and I forced my wife to watch it, and we both were like, "Huh, that was actually pretty action-packed and fun." Go figure. So there you go.
A good time.
Yeah, Black Adam was a good time. All right, let's roll into some book news. Let's see what's going on over in the book world here.
Look into the future to see what it proves. It's time for book news.
So, are you I'm an avid Goodreads user. I see you pop up on there sometimes. How do you like Goodreads?
When I'm reading a lot, I like Goodreads because it helps me not only keep track, but I don't know. It just keeps me moving on things, which is good.
I hate having a book stuck in my currently reading section. I want it out.
Yeah. Well, so again, this is like a very, it's just been a weird year. So honestly, I have like 3 books stuck in my haven't finished section, and they've just been sitting there for a long time. And so I don't like logging into Goodreads right now.
I understand. I feel like the listeners maybe don't have a full understanding of your situation. You say you bought a fixer-upper, but you and Sally have basically been a living, breathing TLC, like remodel special for the last year. Like both of your Instagrams and everything is just sort of like, look, a new transformation. And frankly, I don't understand it. Like I see the before and after pictures, and I believe you that it's the same place, but my mind can't make the connection.
Thank you for saying that. I mean, I hopefully taking this year essentially off of reading, watching any good movies, doing anything of importance in the world other than working on this house. Hopefully it's worth it in the long run.
Yes,
but
definitely it is, because I don't know, there's just something so peaceful about being in a place that you like, that's the way that you like it. You know what I mean? Like that just, yes, I think it is worth it. I co-sign your decision.
Thanks, Nick.
Anyway, I bring up Goodreads because the Goodreads Choice Awards are going on right now, and that's where they put together, a list of like whatever. I don't even know how they do it. Probably bestsellers and whoever pays to get their book included. I don't know, but I always find it kind of useful, just as I'm purchasing for the library or whatever, because oftentimes I'll look at the categories and be like, well, I missed that one. I haven't seen that one. So I'd read. There were several categories where I'd read at least one book. But I always like to watch that. The voting's happening right now, so that's a good time. So you can check out that on Goodreads. And now, Sarah, I will share with you the combined print and ebook bestsellers for December 11th, 2022. They are as follows. Number 10, Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. A scientist and single mother living in California in the 1960s becomes a star on a TV cooking show. Got a great cover.
Yeah.
Number 9, 12 weeks on the list, Fairy Tale by Stephen King. A high school kid inherits a shed that is a portal to another world where good and evil are at war. Again, that's just the Chronicles of Narnia.
A little side note, though, this just made me think of it. Maybe I should
Okay.
check out Fairy Tale by Stephen King, but this house that we bought,
Yes.
there are 6 sheds there, and I haven't fully explored them, so some of them are in a state, and I could imagine there being a portal to hell.
A portal
tucked away in there
to where good
somewhere.
and evil are at war?
It seems likely. I mean, you've seen them. You haven't explored them either, but
I haven't.
feels possible.
I feel like every time I looked at one, 3 or 4 cats came out of it, and I got distracted. So
Well, it would make sense how many cats are coming out of the sheds if there were a portal, potentially.
that's you know what? Actually, we might have just proven your theory's accurate. Number 8, new this week by Danielle Steele. The Whittiers. After tragedy strikes, 6 adult children return to the family home without their parents for the first time.
Sounds dramatic.
That's kind of interesting. I like a good sibling, multi-generational kind of story. Never read a Danielle Steele. What about you?
I have not either, but I agree with you. That actually sounds like something that might be enjoyable.
Yeah. It's got a good vibe. I asked about Danielle Steele because last time I didn't ask you about Nicholas Sparks, and it turns out you'd read a bunch of Nicholas Sparks. So I thought maybe Danielle Steele was going to be it.
Nicholas Sparks.
3?
I said at least 3.
At least 3. Okay.
If that counts as a lot. Maybe it's more. But yeah. No Danielle Steele, though.
No Danielle Steele. Okay. Number 7. 46 weeks on the list. This has been here forever. Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. Tate Collins and Miles Archer, an airline pilot, think they can handle no strings attached arrangements. But, spoiler alert, Sarah, they can't. They need those strings.
Now, how about that one? Do you want to read? I mean, you've had 46 weeks, right?
I don't.
Basically,
No, I don't. I don't. We were talking about this on a recent episode. Colleen Hoover just seemed to sort of explode onto the scene, and like even her books from 5 years ago or whatever, like everybody wants them. I don't get it. We have them. You can come check them out. I don't know why, but you can. Number 6 weeks on the list. The Boys from Biloxi by one Jonathan Grisham. 2 childhood friends follow in their father's footsteps, which puts them on opposite sides of the law.
Curious.
Yeah. Number 5. Oh, brother. 188 weeks on the list. This book, Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. In a quiet town on the North Carolina coast in 1969, a young woman who survived alone in the marsh becomes a murder suspect. Have you read Where the Crawdads Sing?
I don't, and I didn't want to read it, and then it's been on the bestseller list for so long that I thought maybe I do want to read it, and then I read what it's about, and I saw the trailer for the movie, and I was like, nah, I don't want to read it.
I don't know, though, Sarah, because it kind of reads like a Nicholas Sparks novel. It's even set in North Carolina. There's romance and tragedy. I don't know. You could find it to be a guilty pleasure. I'm sorry to repeat this again, gang, but it's so readable. It is. It's not a great book, but you sit down and you just fly right through it, so there is something about it. Number 4. Yeah, here we go. Number 4, 51 weeks on the list. Verity, again by Colleen Hoover. Lowen Ashley is hired by the husband of an injured writer to complete her popular series and uncovers a horrifying truth.
The truth, do you know?
I don't know. Number 3, 76 weeks on the list. Here we go again. It Ends With Us by, any guesses, Sarah? Colleen Hoover. It's Colleen Hoover. It's Colleen Hoover again. A battered wife raised in a violent home attempts to halt the cycle of abuse. Number 2, new this week, The Choice by Nora Roberts, the 3rd book in the Dragonheart Legacy series. Breen Siobhan Kelly confronts darkness during her first Christmas in both Talmouth and Ireland. Wow, dragons and Christmas.
I like it. Not against that.
No. Number 1, 6 weeks on the list. It Starts With Us. It's an easy guess, Sarah. Do you know who wrote it?
Colleen, what's her name?
Yes, Colleen, what's her name? In the sequel to It Ends With Us, Lily deals with her jealous ex-husband, and she reconnects with her first boyfriend.
So what have your patrons been talking about Colleen Hoover? Do you have any sort of ideas about what this is about? Is she spending a lot of money on this, or is she actually very good?
I don't know. Allie and I were talking about this a few weeks back, and we both sort of had the same impression independently that they are soapy and maybe a little sexy,
a little racy,
yeah. So it might be that. It makes sense that they're so high on the combined ebook fiction then, because ebook is where people go for the things that are a little racy.
The racy content. These are the library tidbits that regular folk, us patrons, we don't get this.
You don't know. It's a peek
yeah.
behind the curtain. It's a peek behind the curtain. Yeah. Which you got to be careful of peeking behind curtains in your house because there could just be a hole that opens to the outside. So you really have to watch it.
I think we've mostly patched those. But
Have you? Okay.
in any curtain, at least 2 cats.
Oh my gosh. Sarah, let's get to it. Let's talk about Dune.
Dune. Yeah.
Right, so we covered this last time, but Dune was a book that I always wanted to read. It was I bought a little trilogy box set at an antique store in Arcade, New York while I was in college, and then I set them on a shelf for a couple of decades. Then you and I started talking about Dune. We started reading Dune together, and here we are at the end of the journey. So tell me which ones you've read.
So I've read Dune, Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune. As a purist, as a Frank Herbert purist.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where you got to stop. I understand. So I read the 3 of those. I also read Paul of Dune, which was written by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson, and Winds of Dune. So Paul of Dune takes place in between Dune and Dune Messiah, with flashbacks to a young Paul and Leto. And then Winds of Dune takes place between Dune Messiah and Children of Dune. So we talked a little bit about Paul of Dune last time. I think that one was, I would probably say, worth the read just for like funsies. It's not like, oh, you have to read it. But reading it right after Dune, I found the writing to be a little bit more approachable, and I was able to kind of contextualize some of the stuff from the first book. It helped me sort of bridge some gaps that I was kind of like, oh, I get it now. So I did like that. Winds of Dune, no, not so much. Winds of Dune didn't really. I think they're so desperate to have Paul in the story that we had a lot of flashbacks. And there was a point where Paul and one of his friends literally run away and join the circus. And I was like,
Were these? Was this idea in Frank Herbert's notes?
I think maybe I'm done with the Kevin J. Anderson Dune books. But let me give you the originals. Okay, we have Dune, 1965, Dune Messiah, 1969. Children of Dune, 1976, so a little bit of a gap there. God Emperor of Dune, 1981. Heretics of Dune, 1984. Chapter House Dune, 1985. And then Frank Herbert dies, I want to say in like 1986, so like right after it. Decades later, Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson, well, Brian, I assume, did the searching, but they found notes in Frank Herbert's handwriting that were like Dune 7 and Dune 8. And they use that to sort of string out the final stories in sort of the original saga. So probably if you were a purist, you'd just read the 6, but you might add in Hunters and Sandworms of Dune just to sort of like get the full
round
arc.
out How many Dune books in total do you know, like with Brian's?
Probably 20. I mean, there's several trilogies and they're still coming out. Like one just came out in October of 2022.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
maybe
going strong.
We'll make it that far.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. They're still going pretty strong. Like it seems like they are. So when we talked last, I had only read Dune, but you had read Dune and Dune Messiah. And you said at the time that you felt like those 2 books together made a more complete picture than just stopping Dune.
Do you agree?
I do. That was one thing I thought, like I thought of that as I finished Dune Messiah and was like, this is a much more satisfying conclusion. It's like Dune, I don't know. Dune Messiah really reads more like an extended epilogue, you know?
Yeah.
In a way that I think has a more satisfying oomph. And honestly, I don't know that I really felt like Children of Dune was worth it. What do you think?
Yeah, what were my feelings on Children of Dune? I mean, I had So one observation, even just talking about the end of Dune, is coming to the end of Children of Dune. It felt very similar in that the ending just felt really abrupt. It was kind of weird.
Yeah.
And it was confusing. Like it happened so quickly. And it felt like there were a lot of threads that he didn't really tie up very well or didn't want to tie up for whatever reason. But yeah, I mean, beyond that, I think Children of Dune, it felt a little more confusing for sure. And I have some like gripes with kind of the overall premise of the book.
Yeah.
But it also just was kind of like I don't know, it was enjoyable in some ways. I will say like the transformation of Leto was wild.
Yeah.
Leto Jr. we're talking about. Yep.
Like, that just felt like out of left field. Like, Frank Herbert had this, like, in the back of his mind, and then he was like, "Guess what?" And I'm like, "Wait, is this the same is this pot? Like, what's happening? Am I supposed to believe this guy is, like, turning into" I don't know. It was just a strange, wild choice.
Well,
Did not see
the
it coming.
thing that's I don't know. I felt this way a little bit about all 3 of the Dune books, but I felt it particularly with Children of Dune, where like I read the book and then I went and I read sort of a synopsis, like analysis of the book. And reading the synopsis kind of broken down in a linear way, I was kind of like, these are a lot of very interesting themes to explore. Like, again, multi-generational you have going on, and you have things kind of paying off generations later and stuff. And that's cool and that's interesting. I read an interview with Frank Herbert when he was talking about, the question was basically like, now that Dune is just this legendary thing, now that it's, you know, 'cause even during his lifetime, you know, by the mid 80s, it had already become this like thing. You know, Children of Dune was the first bestseller from the sci-fi genre. So like even within his lifetime, the first Dune had become this revered book of fiction, and the question was put to him like, what do you think about that? Like, how does that impact you? How does that make you feel about the series? And he was just kind of blown away by it. And he said in that interview, he said that he'd written portions of Children of Dune and Dune Messiah before he even finished the original Dune. So it's like he had this whole like long generational story kind of in his mind, and I got the vibe, and I couldn't really find specifics about this, but I kind of got the sense that like he had teased out the long versions of these stories and kind of used that to influence writing that first book. So that to me explained a little bit why sometimes it feels a little fragmented, and why it feels like why these endings feel so abrupt and things, because in his mind, like he's kind of already written, you know, like the continuation, because they're all kind of overlapping with each other in the writing process, which to me seems like would be crazy confusing.
Yeah, which and no, that makes sense to me too. I mean, it's funny because even describing that process, it sounds like the way that he describes the experience of being like Paul or Leto, where they're having all these like multi-visions happening in their heads at all times, and like trying to exist in the world, and their weird, obscure conversations with the people around them.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say like one thing that I think my biggest gripe with the book, and let me know if you had this thought too, but the idea that the terraforming of Dune is essentially destroying the habitat of the sandworms, which is going to destroy basically the like
society.
Society, because it will impact spice production so much.
Right.
And so my first thought with that was, maybe I'm taking this a little personal, because for those of you who don't know, I dressed up as Liet Kynes at the Fred and Harriet Taylor Memorial Library fundraiser this past year. So
we'll include a picture, don't you worry. Yeah.
I'm a little protective of the Imperial Planetary Ecologist.
I know you are.
But so Liet Kynes, of course, has this whole plan. And in Dune, all of the Fremen, who are the, you know, original people of Arrakis, they're working, you know, what is this, like a generations long plan towards terraforming Dune and, you know, just making it a habitable place for plants and whatever.
Yeah.
So you would think someone who's an ecologist would have a plan for making sure that the desert and the function it serves isn't destroyed. Like, that's just like a pretty basic.
I think that's step one.
Things are interconnected.
Yeah.
What can we get rid of? What needs to stay?
Right.
And then the other side of it is that Liet Kynes was worked for the Imperium, and the Imperium definitely doesn't want spice production to cease or even become less.
Yeah.
So it just felt really unrealistic and like a weird choice for that to be the driving plot. You know?
It is because essentially it's like the whole world is sand. Do we need it? You know, like, I mean,
exactly.
Probably. Yeah, you probably do. You probably do for your society. I can't help but feel a little bit like the series becomes a bit of a run-on sentence, you know, like the thing that's so great about the ending of Dune Messiah, I think, is that it leaves a lot to the imagination. It's not a tidy ending by any means, but the stuff that it dangles is the kind of stuff that's sort of interesting to think about. You know, it's kind of like, I wonder what happened next. I wonder if this ever resolves. Whereas like the first book and Children of Dune end in a way that's like dissatisfying. It doesn't give you enough to really like form thoughts on yourself. It feels like there is another couple of chapters and he just forgot to send them to the editor, you know?
Yeah, I
But I
agree.
just kind of wonder, with the way the story and the characters are structured, like, can you write a satisfying ending? Like, doesn't it sort of necessitate that the ending is going to be, and they continued on, you know? Like, I don't know how you can be like the
4,000
end.
years.
Yeah. Yeah, really though. I don't see how you could do it. So maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe that's why it's as popular as it is. I don't know, but it just kind of seems like
Yeah.
it just keeps going.
I mean, I do just sort of feel like he is, and again, this is my experience with 2 out of 3 of his books, so 66% of the material I have engaged with. I think he's not necessarily the best at endings,
Yes.
but even the ending of Children of Dune, it's like
Spoilers!
But even the ending of Children of Dune, it's like Paul is killed in the square, and that's it.
Yeah.
They talk about Leto too, like having his water or whatever beside him on the throne, but I just feel like Paul just dies.
Yeah.
This character that we've been, so like the
Right.
entire series has been sort of based around him, and
Yeah.
that's
I
just
know.
it. Like he's just dead. That's
And
yeah.
that also to me felt a little bit like we've already ended a book with essentially the death of Paul, you know? And like here let's do it again, you know. And obviously it's more final this time, but yeah, there was something about that too that I sort of felt like, okay, you know, like the thought of him just kind of being out there is interesting, and then like tying that
Yeah.
up, like that's the thing they choose to tie up, did feel a little bit like a misstep to me. I couldn't help but feel while reading Children of Dune that it's like watching the later seasons of a TV show and like all the stars have left, you know? It's kind of like, yeah, there's things you like, there's characters that you still kind of like, but it doesn't so much have a center anymore. And I feel like Children of Dune really kind of struggled with that.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. And I think because I never liked Paul, to be fair, but Paul was a little more interesting than Leto, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, yes, I think if you had to choose a main character of this book, you would say, Leto the second. But like, I don't know. I mean, you could kind of make an argument for Jessica and Alia, and like, I think that's the problem. Like, you're right. Paul's not a great character on his own, but like narratively and structurally in those stories, he serves as a centerpiece. And without him, I don't really feel like anybody's elevated to take that mantle, you know?
I agree.
That's a thing that I have. Like, I like to have like a central like lead in this kind of thing, something to kind of anchor you. And that's where I struggled here.
So the other thing I thought was interesting about this was that with what they seem to be saying about Paul, and I read like a little bit after finishing the book about it, but so like Paul didn't see far enough into the future, right? So he was short-sighted, but then he also understood that in order to really achieve peace or to avoid like total human extinction, that he would have to do the thing which Leto the Second did, which is to essentially become a sandworm.
Right. Right. Which is not where I saw this going. I have to say that was not what I thought.
But it felt like there was no and maybe you would disagree with me here, but reading Dune and Dune Messiah, there was no indication of that. Like it sort of felt like if this was the turn we were going to take, which is like I was floored when I got there because I was like, this is crazy. But if this is the turn we're going to take, you kind of want to have all these moments that you think back to. They're like, oh wow, so that's why Paul said that. Like that's what Paul was talking about.
Right.
None of that existed, so it just felt like
more with the Fremen, because the Fremen kind of had the relationship with, at least they had more interaction with the sandworms than the others, and like something in their religion or something in their beliefs could have been kind of a push in that direction. But you hear so much about Paul and being the Kwisatz Haderach and all that stuff. Nowhere in there. Yeah, I agree. It just doesn't seem to be layered in early enough. And when you consider that he's kind of overlapping the writing and stuff, that's weird to me. One thing that I felt, even in the first book, I mean, it technically is sci-fi because of, it's set in our world and it's set like in the future and all that stuff. So it makes it more sci-fi than like a straight up fantasy novel. But even so, it really skirts the line of fantasy and sci-fi. By the time we get to the end of Children of Dune, we're full on fantasy novel.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I really think it ceases to be a sci-fi novel, and like with Leto doing what he's gonna do, becomes much more fantastical.
I agree with you, and I think maybe that's why it felt a little bit weird. Is it's not just
Yeah.
that I didn't see it coming, but it just felt like there was no foundation for this to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
That said, so when it happened, and for people who haven't read it, there's this moment where Leto the Second, who's like this 9-year-old kid, although he's not a kid because he has the memories of countless ancestors.
Right. Yeah.
He goes out into the desert and lets these little creatures called sand trout just sort of start eating him, or they're like mouthing along his body essentially. And eventually they keep coming up his arms and like attaching to him, and they end up covering his body and creating this sort of
Right.
impenetrable suit that gives him superhuman powers.
It's a very upsetting thing. I don't know. It's I wasn't a fan of that, but yeah.
Yeah, it was a little hard to read. But it was interesting.
It was.
I mean, I would say it was interesting.
Yeah.
So that's what happens. So these sand trout climbing up his arms, and he transforms into this, like, he's still a human, but what will happen is that he'll become more and more animal, so to speak. Or this weird hybrid that no longer thinks like a human, and is biologically no longer a human. And I wasn't a huge fan of it in terms of the plot of the book, but then I went and looked up the fan art, and I was like, this is actually pretty cool. I'm into this. I would watch a rendition of this on screen, and apparently there is a miniseries actually.
Yeah, the Children of Dune miniseries with James McAvoy. It encompasses parts of Dune Messiah as well. I know. I kind of felt the same thing. I'd like to see it. I wondered what you thought. I can't remember if you said this in the last episode or just when we were talking in our real lives, but you weren't thrilled with the way the women were portrayed, and I wondered how you felt about that in the second, like in the later half here in Children of Dune.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think he improved in that department anymore. I think all women are interesting and they're powerful, but there's still always the last to figure out what's happening, or even someone like Aaliyah who becomes possessed, which is fine. Like, someone had to become possessed, right? Someone had to be Abomination. But it just always feels like, Jessica could be so cool, and she is so cool, but he always portrays her as just being like a little bit slow. Like, he's like, oh yeah, she's so wise and smart, but then the way she actually behaves doesn't always reflect that. Like, the men are smarter. And that's what I felt with Anima too.
Yeah, because even in the first book, there's almost kind of a like, wow, she can almost keep up with Leto. That's great. You know what I mean?
Exactly. No, truly. Yeah. That's how I felt with. I always want to say Ganima. My audiobook that I listened to said Ganima. But so Ganima. So it was sort of the same with her, where she is exactly the same as Leto II, right? Like,
Ganima and Leto are the children of Paul. I don't think we said that, but
and so they're twins. They have the same sort of like mental powers and like all of these things. Like, they are on the same playing field. But she doesn't play that big of a role, and even at the end of the book, she's like, well, one of us had to have the sand eat them, become this weird monstrous super god person. I was like, well, why not Ganima?
Right. And that, I mean, I think story-wise, that would have been more interesting if it was her. For it to just be Leto is kind of like whatever. But Aaliyah, I guess, was the one that I was most I don't know. I guess after Messiah, I kind of thought that she was going to take the mantle and really kind of be the lead of the series for the next book. That's what I was expecting. And she's so, I mean, I guess she's not really benched, but she's not the center of the action. And as you said, with the possession and the abomination, she's kind of taken out of play as far as the push of the narrative goes. And I was disappointed by that.
I was disappointed too. And I think so at the end, I guess, I don't know if we're doing spoiler alerts or not, but
I think we've already said Paul's killed and Leto becomes a giant worm monster. So yeah, I think the ship has sailed.
Well, so Aaliyah, like, so she becomes possessed by her grandfather, who's this really like malevolent figure in the original books, or in the earlier books.
Right.
But at the end, even under his influence, she's able to like neutralize herself essentially by throwing herself out the window and killing herself. And it should have been like, and that's like that's sort of common to have these people who are good characters who are taken over by some evil force, and then they do the right thing at the very end, and that can be like so powerful and like so profound. But I feel like it wasn't that powerful and wasn't that profound, at least for my experience as a reader, because
No, I think you're right.
throughout the book it just didn't seem like she was struggling with him very much. Like I felt like we didn't get enough insight into her character throughout the possession to feel any sympathy or even be rooting for her at the very end.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sort of felt like a wasted opportunity.
Yeah. Well, again, I feel like this is a character who, when all of that happened, she kind of ceases to become a character, and it's more about how that stuff moves the plot. She becomes like a plot device instead of a character.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, agreed.
So I was disappointed. I was disappointed with that. I don't know, I just go back and forth on these books. I guess I feel like the thing that you said last time is the thing that I most feel about these books, that Dune and Dune Messiah together make a really satisfying read, and I think that like that's a perfect place to walk away.
Yeah.
Because I think the openness that you end on Messiah on has a lot of like, wow, so much more crazy things are going to happen, but like you don't need it. I think that's really good. Now that we're in it, as far as we're in it, Sarah, are you gonna do more? Like, do you think you're gonna move on to God Emperor of Dune?
Yeah, I mean, well, so Sally picked it up at one point, and little old me, not knowing who the weird worm man on the front was, I was like, "What could this possibly be?" Wow.
Yeah.
So now I understand who it is. But
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do have God Emperor of Dune. I think I'm gonna keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I really like this universe. I think it's great. I don't always feel like
I
his
do too.
storytelling is the best.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of the themes and the world itself, it's great. Like I'm interested,
I agree. We did a sci-fi book club here, and we did Dune, and we just had a great discussion. We talked about it for so long, and then the next time, I can't remember what it was. I can't remember I think it was Left-Handed Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. Like we talked a lot about that book, but then we sort of were like, it kind of reminded me of how in Dune, we kept like going back. So really, we had like 2 Dune book clubs, and that's just it. Like when you start, there's so much going on. There's so many different angles being worked, and I don't know. There's so much to it that like even though reading it is occasionally a chore, often a chore, you get to the end and it's just like, man, wow.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting, and I do sort of it'd be interesting to read his notes or have sort of like a compilation from that perspective of just like a field guide. It probably exists somewhere, like a field guide to Dune that's talking about all the different aspects of this world. Would be really fascinating.
Yeah, a while back, I was in Frederick, Maryland, where we vacationed that time. I was meeting my old friend Eric Mickles. Yeah, and we went to this bookstore, and there was a bunch of like vintage 70s, 80s paperbacks of Frank Herbert books not connected with Dune, and so I picked up a bunch of them, and like I want to give that a try too, to see like what his writing is like in a contained, smaller story that is a standalone. Because I feel like that's part of the thing that's a struggle with Dune, is that he's thinking so far ahead, or at least wanting to make sure he leaves himself openings for future entries that, sometimes you can get bogged down with that. So I want to give one of these a shot and see how that goes. But yeah, like I said last time, and it wasn't just the COVID talking. I'm with you. I'm with you to the end of this Dune train. So,
but is it the hunger talking today?
It might be. It might be. I mean, it was a good croissant that I had. The jam was really nice, but I need protein.
Yeah.
We'll
eat some meat tonight. Oh wait.
I don't know. I can't.
Get some chickpeas.
I'll have to eat some. I'll eat some black beans and some chickpeas.
Let me know how you feel after.
Some cheese cubes, and I think I'll be able to shake
after
it off.
That, yeah. But no, I mean, I don't regret reading Children of Dune. Like especially because I got to continue this journey with you, Nick. Always a joy.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you in terms of what I would suggest for someone else. I would just say the first 2. Gives you everything you need to like get your wheels turning, but Children of Dune I don't think added very much, except for thinking about whatever's happening to Leto's body. I mean that sort of has a sick, weird fascination
about that. Yeah, it's kind of like those like pedicure things you could do where you put in the little fish come in and they like eat the dead skin off your. It's like that.
Yeah, but they keep going.
Only covering your entire body and turning you into a fish monster.
Oh my gosh! And the other thing I totally forgot to even mention that he marries his sister at the end.
Yes.
I think I shut it out.
Well, that comes up early on in the
Yeah,
book,
and they're like,
well, no, remember, like, inbreeding is forbidden, and I was like, do you need to say that? and I guess, yeah, it was worth noting that that's not what you're supposed to do, because they do it. His twin sister.
It's very weird, and I understand because this is going back to Leto's weird body that he has now.
Yeah,
but like he can't. I mean, so essentially they can't consummate the marriage, which is great.
Yeah, good news.
So their line will continue through this sort of like consort type of figure.
Right.
But it's still just like, why do you two need to get married? That was weird. I was like, this is like a weird incest theme that when they brought it up initially, I was like, I don't know, it was the 70s or like this. I wouldn't probably do this now, but people write weird things. But then when he actually went through with it and was like, no, they got married. That's what makes the most political sense. I was like, I don't see it.
Do you think he's like basically referencing history, histories of monarchies and things past? I mean, do you think he's sort of playing with those themes of things that actually happened in empires? Or do you think it was just, let's be weird? I don't know.
Some like weird kinkiness that he has.
Did he create Wonder Woman? No.
Wait a minute.
William.
No, I mean, I think he isn't, because he even refers to it as sort of like, or refers to Leto as being some sort of like pharaoh type figure.
Right. Yeah.
And that, I mean, that did happen in Egypt, right? I know it happens in many cultures.
Sure did. Yeah.
Yes, but I feel like there was at least one story of this happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't. It just felt kind of unnecessary and just like a little. It was like he was leaning in instead of just letting it be this like disturbing possibility that the twins were trying to avoid. It became like the golden path, like the way forward includes me marrying my sister. It's just weird.
This is probably not a good sign, but I genuinely don't remember how things play out with Jessica. Where's Jessica at the end of this?
Good question. See, this is why he doesn't write good endings.
Right, yeah. Well, okay, then maybe it's not my fault. Maybe it's Frank Herbert's fault.
I think we can safely blame him.
Let's do it.
I feel bad because we're bashing him so much. I have a deep appreciation, but I don't know.
No, I do too. I think that's clear. I mean, I think we both really appreciate the world, and I wish the writing was a little better,
Yeah. It does make me sad, though. I do wonder what happened to Jessica.
Well, the next time is God Emperor of Dune moving into the 80s.
So can't wait.
We'll see if 80s excess plays out, and I guess it will because he's a giant space war god now. So
we'll get to it.
That's nothing if not the excess of the 80s.
Yeah, I'm really curious about. I have so many thoughts about how that's going to work, but we'll get into it.
Yeah,
we'll learn.
I'm very excited for the next, the sequel to the Zendaya Timothée Chalamet one. I do want to watch the miniseries, and I still want to watch like the classic movie that I've never seen. We should watch it together. Yeah. I think that's a commitment that we've made to each other right now that we're going to watch it together
in front of all these listeners.
Yes, that's right. Do you have COVID yet? Because we've been talking about. Because I feel okay, but how do you feel?
Yeah,
feverish? You feeling good?
Nope. I feel like I have a regular temperature. No more brain fog than usual.
Nothing. Okay, just the usual.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it then on this week's episode of How's Things. Next time when we're back, my old friend Bo Hutchings is going to be here. It's the Cozy Bros third Christmas. We're going to read some cheesy Christmas murder mysteries together. So good times and glad tidings will be had by all. All right, Sarah, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, everybody.